Hello and welcome to the Unusual Stories podcast. My name is Wojciech Salski, I'll be your host for today. And before we begin, may I just remind you, as per usual, the best way to support this podcast, as you might expect, is to share it with a friend and click the follow or subscribe button. It makes a world of a difference if you, put it out there for someone else to see. And of course, if you'd like to support the podcast in any other way, maybe by commenting below whether or not you think this is useful, or sending me an email, or supporting the podcast financially, then please follow the link below. And I'm very grateful for all of you out there who are supporting, who are listening, and who are reaching out to me. You know, I recently had the chance to get yet another very positive and kind comment, and it means a lot. It does mean a lot, even though it might seem like a little. But for someone creating something they believe in, I get the payout out of this just by the mere creation, by this moment. But it suffice to say, I still appreciate deeply, and it fills my heart with joy to hear from my friends and people that I've not even met before that this podcast or some idea or whatever that I've created in any way enriched their life, and that is truly wonderful. So thank you for that. For today, going with the spirit of time and also following up on our last week's discussion of the creature from Jekyll Island, I thought it might be best to explore what can we do about it further by diving fairly deeply into the book called The Bitcoin Standard. And I think it's especially, a good moment for it, considering Bitcoin recently hit an all-time high once again. And, there has been quite a few changes happening around the world, especially in the United States. New cabinet was elected. I bet the majority of you, as I know you are from the United States, I bet you are wondering how it will impact your life. I hope that you're hopeful and optimistic. But for whatever you feel about these circumstances and elections and everything, there are ways that you can make yourself better in the future. You can secure your future with this new medium, which is not so new anymore, but it certainly is new in the larger scheme of things, called Bitcoin. And funnily enough, I was talking with my girlfriend today earlier, discussing which episode to go with, and it was her that suggested that maybe I should share with you this particular book, especially, going with the spirit of time. But also we started discussing it, and I thought it's actually a really good moment for it because of all the, turmoil and maybe uncertainty that one may feel. And, following the guidance and advice of Ray Dalio, if you worry, you don't have to worry, and if you don't worry, you have to worry, and kind of preparing for what's yet to come, I think it is a perfect moment for you to consider these ideas. And it does not necessarily mean that you should get yourself Bitcoin today. I don't want this to be in any way a financial advice. I just don't have enough expertise in that manner. And of course, whatever I do with my own finances is maybe for better or worse supportive advice for you. But when discussing this episode and this book, my main goal is to open a new paradigm for you to explore. and to encourage you, most importantly, to read the book, because I think by far, The Creature from Jekyll Island from last week, it's a book that is worth a read, but it's also very troubling, and it's not necessarily the easiest. Whereas the Bitcoin Standard, in comparison, is a walk in the park. It really, truly is an easy to read and understand book. And it has also, I would argue, the majority of questions and queries you might have about Bitcoin and blockchain and money, most importantly money and the sense of money, the meaning of true money, hard money. It has all the answers, or at least the majority of them, within the book in a form that is understandable for most. So I would encourage you to listen to it on Audible like I did, or maybe get yourself a paper copy, or whatever maybe you want to read on Kindle or whatnot. The point is, though, it might be that this book would be a great start for you on your journey of financial literacy, because the first, I think, more or less half of the book talks about money in general and sort of outlines the road we have taken to arrive where we are in terms of financial and money in general area in the world. And so I've prepared some few topics. I am a bit under the weather today, so please bear with me. I'll probably be a bit slower than usual. I'll be taking more sips of my coffee, to which I forgot to buy milk. And I hope that this can be an episode with a little bit of a slower pace, but certainly a substance-heavy result. And I've prepared some quotes for you. I have 3 major topics I will talk about, and then I'll refer to some other podcasts as well as links below that can help you explore this topic further. And I would truly, if there is one thing to take away from this monologue of 7 minutes so far, get involved and start to understand it. Become curious. Just get curious, guys. I think that's what I would like for you after this episode. So, let's start with coming back a little bit a week prior, and addressing in outlining maybe the topic of money. If you remember, we've talked about it briefly. Money has, by definition, a few qualities that should be fulfilled for money to be good money. So, for example, money should be scarce. It should be limited. It cannot be easily printable, for example, which we already have one reason to not truly consider fiat money to be the good money. But it should be scarce, limited. It should be divisible, because that makes it easier for us to exchange value for that money. It's much more difficult to, for example, back in the day when we used barter, which was basically exchanging one good for the other, it's much more difficult to carry 1.5 cow to pay for 2.5 horse than to carry 3 gold coins to buy 4 horses, right? So it should be divisible easily, and it would be great if it can be divisible ad infinitum. And then it should be a potential store of value, which means, we should not use for money things that can rot or get broken easily, which is why, for example, it would not be the best idea for you to buy a bag of rice and consider it your store of value. And as we've discussed before, money in general, last week we've discussed this, money in general is a sort of a promise for the future, right? If I have a gold coin today that is worth X amount of dollars, for example, if I keep it for the future, because this gold will still stay itself over time, the likelihood of it being worth less than before is fairly low, if not existent, and the likelihood of it getting broken and sort of, disappearing, for example, or being rotten is not there, right? Unless I lose it, or unless someone takes it from me, it will be there 10 years time, 20 years time, 100 years time from now. And gold, and one more before I go into that rabbit hole, and it should be possible for us to keep it somewhere, to store the value there, and we should be able to measure other things with it, measure the value of other things with it. So over the millennia, humans and civilizations all around the world used all kinds of money, all kinds of items as money. Back in the day, there used to be time when salt was considered money. There was an island that actually used for money sort of stone blocks on which the whole population of the village would know which stone belongs to whom, and they would actually just exchange the ownership of the stone as a sign of exchanging the value. People used glass beads, sort of glass little balls, as money, and obviously people used silver, copper, gold, and now in quasi-modern world, we also use fiat currency and Bitcoin, which is cryptocurrency. And the main point here, coming back to gold, is it seems like again and again over the centuries, gold stayed as a best contender for the role of hard, good money, because it is very scarce and it's limited in the Earth's crust. It's difficult to take it out, which means that you cannot flood the market suddenly with a lot of gold, making the gold that people have devalue, which is what happens with fiat currency, as we discussed last week. And it's infinitely divisible. You can melt it into, huge blocks of gold or tiny little coins or even just tiny little nuggets. And it can be storing value over time because you're not likely to destroy it. It's very difficult to destroy it. Of course, for example, if you would use gold in a rocket and the rocket would explode, then one could argue that gold was destroyed. But it's not easy to get rid of gold. You cannot just smash it into pieces. I mean, you will, if you manage to smash it into pieces, you'll just have many pieces of the same gold. It's not like gold disappeared. Because of that, gold for centuries was the ultimate store of value, the ultimate money. And as we go through the ages, as the book explores in greater depth, and I would encourage you to read it rather than listen to my perspective on all of it. But over the millennia, again and again, gold was considered to be a sort of a currency, a money that people used to trade with one another. But there is one big problem with gold. One practical big problem, which is its weight. Because gold is heavy, it's difficult to be transported. And since it's difficult to be transported, there came a time in somewhere around 15th, 16th century when trading companies came up with this idea, and this is something that in Venice was, Florence and Venice were the first sort of city-states to truly explore this concept in depth and really make great effort towards it, that instead of taking that gold every time we want to trade and exchange it as if in cash, we will just keep the gold in our stores, for example, in a bank, and a person will get a bank note, which was a claim, a credit claim to some of the gold. And for example, if I owned 100 pieces of gold or silver and they were stored in one of the banks, locally, I could give my girlfriend a banknote, written official sort of letter of ownership, specifying that I want to give her 50 gold coins, and then she can show up to the bank and take those 50 gold coins out. Or, even better for the bank and for us, if we don't want to get robbed having that gold with us, she can just keep it in the bank account under her name. And this is where banks became a reality. To begin with, banks were simply organizations that kept sort of were safeguarding people's wealth while simultaneously allowing people to borrow. But the one important thing to note straight away is, at the beginning, the borrowing of the bank, lending of the bank and borrowing from the bank were always connected to this limited resource of gold. There was a gold reserve. This is the gold standard, as we can call it, which basically meant the bank could not lend more money that it would be able to actually give away. And similarly, the bank could not take from people more money that they were able to give. This basically meant that it was sound money. Sound meaning good, meaning right, meaning in the right place, sort of, true. The thing is, you cannot really make much... Rewind. The potential for earnings is much greater from the banker's perspective the moment the banker is no longer obliged to keep exact amount of deposits in their bank as they are lending out. So this is where the ratios became a problem. So in the book, you can explore it in greater depth. And last week, we've also discussed that The Creature from Jekyll Island is definitely the book to really explore this concept further. But over time, the point is, banks became more and more aggressive in taking down the reserve needed to be kept in their stores, in their vaults, at the same time expanding the amount of money that they were giving away. Because the bank earns money on the interest rate, and so if it is able to give you $100 and get $20 back from you for that exchange, it's better for the bank than if it can only give you $90 and get only 19 in exchange, right? So it's to the bank's benefit to be able to lend more than they actually can. And obviously the assumption always is that there won't be any crisis at any given moment that would make everyone want their gold back. And so for some time, this charade of giving away more than you actually had could work. The problem appears the moment there is, for example, war. And we've discussed that last week. I'm just going to briefly mention this topic. And this is echoed in this book as well. I actually had a quote here for you. There is, with a gold standard in place, wars are impossible to continue endlessly. As we've discussed, it's impossible for two armies to endlessly fight if both of them have their limited resources. The moment the resources become unlimited, for example, because there is a bank being willing to fund more and more war from money that is ultimately not true, because it can just print it for free, then that perpetuates this war and this horrible thing that we tend to do, and it seems to we're always doing still, and might be for the years to come. So the main point here is gold standard, if it was kept, and I'll explore in a moment why it wasn't, where it wasn't, and when it wasn't. If it was kept, it would be a sort of a limiting way of making sure we don't spend more than we can spend, and therefore we don't, for example, fight longer than we could. Which, I mean, this in itself is a troubling idea, and we're just getting started, guys. So just one beginning concept to explore. So let's summarize. Gold is the ultimate, sort of greatest of them all, in terms of the sound money up until early 2000s, when something shows up. This entity, Satoshi Nakamoto, we don't know if it was one person, if it was a group of programmers, we don't really know, comes up with this digital gold version, which is Bitcoin. And in the same way, and I'll try to outline here how Bitcoin works, but please, please, please educate yourself. I'm only sharing with you how I understand it, and I'm also really simplifying things for the sake of my own understanding. So please don't quote me as the source for understanding how programming of Bitcoin works. I think that would be a bit of a stretch. But to address all these four qualities of money that we've discussed in terms of gold, we can say that Bitcoin is scarce, it's limited, because its algorithm will not allow more than 21 million Bitcoin to ever be mined, produced, extracted, if you will. It's ultimately divisible ad infinitum, because even though one Bitcoin is one, it can be divided into millions of satoshis, which are basically just smaller parts of the bigger part of Bitcoin. So people could potentially divide it ad infinitum as well and exchange it in divided form. It can be a store of value because, as we've discussed earlier, if something is difficult to be destroyed, and this is the most contentious of those topics, which is why I would encourage you to engage in the debate around Bitcoin and understand for yourself why, for example, personally, I believe that Bitcoin is already past its adoption rate needed for it to never be destroyed, but one could argue that there is still a potential of turning off all the computers that ever had anything to do with Bitcoin, and in that way completely paralyzing the system. It's unlikely to happen because the market capitalization of this resource is huge, and of course people who are engaged with it will not want to let it go, the same way as you wouldn't want to let your gold go if your family's future depends on it. So therefore, it seems to be a store of value over time. It certainly was for the past 13 or so years. And then we can measure other items with it, because in the same way that Bitcoin can be measured in dollars, dollars could be measured in Bitcoin. And in the same way that, you know, at the moment, if you go into the cafe and you buy yourself a coffee that is measured in value by your local currency, your local fiat money, it wouldn't be completely crazy to have Bitcoin prices there. Of course, it wouldn't be practical, especially if not everyone is using Bitcoin, and if Bitcoin, if one coffee would be like 0.000001 of Bitcoin. That's a bit silly, but you could do it potentially. You can already measure things in Bitcoin. It's just a matter of doing the calculation, and obviously it might be slightly impractical at the moment. So now, if we consider this as an invitation to think that Bitcoin could potentially be a similar to gold money, hard money, good money, then our second topic of the podcast appears, which is why should you care? And I sort of alluded to it before. I'll read a quote here for you and then I'll explore it. History shows it is not possible to insulate yourself from the consequences of others holding money that is harder than yours. And basically what this quote alludes to, and as you read the book, you'll hear a bunch of different stories that truly explore this concept in greater depth, and some of them are quite heartbreaking, but c'est la vie, that's just history for you. It seems that whoever has the better money wins over time. So if you have a piece of gold and I have the same amount of the same value of that gold in dollars, over the next 20 years, if we continue in the direction where we are heading so far with our fiscal policies, and we've discussed that last week, so please refer to that episode and educate yourself. If the value of dollar keeps going down because the inflation and the sort of supply of dollars increases because the central bank is, for example, printing more dollars, then in 20 years or in 10 years time, if we compare our dollars amount with the gold that we held, even though the amount of gold might have not changed and the amount of dollars that we have in our pocket might have not changed, I will actually, with my dollars, I will be able to buy less for them than you will with your gold. And this is the whole point. Hard money over time gets better than weak money. It just pushes the weak money out. It's like betting on the better sportsman, for example, obviously in the long term. In the same way as well, because of the inflation, any alternative to fiat currency store of value might actually gain in value, which is yet another reason to diversify your portfolio. Because even if you don't worry too much about the fact that the United States Federal Reserve or Polish central bank is going to print another million or trillion of dollars or zlotys over the course of next year, because you live and breathe that, that space and you're okay. You could potentially hedge your bets, make yourself more secure by putting some of your hard-earned, well-earned dollars or zlotys into alternative asset, which potentially could become an investment if it goes up in value as the value of your money goes down, or it could just hold the same amount of value while your dollar amount and value goes down over time, because there is so much of it being printed. And this all sounds complicated, maybe, hopefully not, but I get, every now and then I talk with people about it, and I get why you can get confused and sort of overwhelmed with it to begin with. The thing is, though, it's simply put, it's like betting on what is gonna keep its value or what it's gonna gain in value over time versus what's going to lose value over time. And even if you don't truly believe what the previous book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, says, or even this book says, why wouldn't you ensure and get safer by putting 2 bets at the same time? Why don't you put half of your savings in dollars that you so much love, and the other half of your savings in something alternative, which potentially, either property or stock market or gold or Bitcoin, which can potentially, balance out this. And as I said, this episode is not aimed as a financial advice. It's a start of a conversation, especially around Bitcoin, because I truly believe that because of the qualities of Bitcoin and the way Bitcoin was designed and where it's heading, we will see more and more. And we've already seen the moves in the world the moment elections happened. Bitcoin skyrocketed, which is a signal for us that many Bitcoiners in the world, and many people that maybe have not been Bitcoiners before, or banks that have not had Bitcoin before but now they want to buy it, are making a bet that this is going to be useful asset to have into the future. And now, why you should care? Because it's your future and the future of your kids and your country. But now let's talk about the time preference, because this is where the rubber meets the road, really. This is where we can explore on which side of the barricade, so to speak, one stands. So I talk so much, my coffee is cold already. I guess that's what one does in a podcast. So let's talk about time preference. There is this phenomenon, an observable fact about the way we act, is that, since future is uncertain, but it's certainly coming in some form, each of us has a certain threshold, a certain level of time preference. A low time preference would be, I only think about myself today, tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, maybe. Higher time preference could be, for example, I think where I'm going to be and what I'm going to be like in 2 years' time, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. A very high time preference would be, where I'm going to be in 50 years. How is this world going to look like with me in or without me in 50 years? And depending on through which lens you are seeing your actions of today, you're more or less likely to take certain decisions in a certain direction. So, there is a big, over the past few years, there is a huge debate about climate change and its effects on the world, on our population, and so forth. The problematic thing with trying to tackle, for example, fossil fuel use in the world is, it is observable fact that people who are struggling to make their ends meet, or who are struggling to have food on their table, and so I'm not talking about all of you guys listening to this because you have a means of listening to this, which in itself is probably, putting you up on quite a high percentile in terms of the world's wealth. People who are struggling to make their ends meet and who are struggling to feed their kids or their families or themselves are really unlikely to care about the way the world will look like in 10 years. Their time preference is very low. They worry so much about today that they don't think about the way their burning of coal or their using of, plastic, non-recyclable plastic bags will affect the world. They have bigger problems to deal with. And we have to understand that we have to empathize with it, because it's such an arrogant and problematic stand to take. If I'm privileged enough to have a roof over my head, food, I have a coffee here with sugar in it. I've got this wonderful setup, I'm living well, I'm healthy, I can eat where I need to, I have an education, a job. And then I say, okay, now I'm going to care about the environment. I'm going to buy from, sustainable sources. I'm going to reduce my environmental footprint or whatever impact. Well, that's all fair. I can do whatever I want. I can contribute to a local charity. I can do it because my imminent needs, my most essential of needs as a human, are met. A person who doesn't have a roof over their head, who doesn't have a coffee with sugar in it, who doesn't have food where they need to, who doesn't have this wonderful setup, a job, a health, whatever, why would they care about the recycled material? Why would they care about the future of anything if they need to care about the future of them today? So, this is a bit of a tangent just to set the scene for this time preference playing such a crucial part in our daily activities. And now let's leave aside for a moment the extreme of this. Let's assume that all people in question are in a similar situation like myself, fairly okay financially, not maybe the best everything, but we're getting by. We're able to think about our future. I don't worry, will I eat today or tomorrow? I can plan where I'm going to be in a year or two. Now, the moment we're in this position, we can extend our time preference. And this is what I would like to invite you to do in all areas of your life. Because, and this is an experiment I will bring up and then explain what can you do about it. There was a time preference experiment run, which is described in the book as well, called the marshmallow experiment. You probably know it. You can go on YouTube or Google and check it out. The experiment basically placed children in a room with a marshmallow or a sweet. And children were told that if you don't eat this marshmallow right now, I will come back in 15 minutes and you will get 2 marshmallows. So there was a high time preference introduced to the equation, right? Kids were offered an option of having 2 marshmallows instead of 1, as long as they're willing to wait. So they delay the gratification rather than take the instant gratification route, but then they miss out on the second marshmallow. And I know by now you're obviously fully exploring this concept because you know this podcast so much, but we've talked about instant gratification versus delayed gratification with so many other topics. This is relevant everywhere, guys. Now, what the researchers found is kids who were willing to wait and delay their gratification, delay the eating of the marshmallow, once they were followed up with after 20, 30 years post-study, it turned out these children who were willing to wait performed better on average in their relationships, in their jobs, in their financial health, in their health in general. They were taking care of the world and themselves better than those children who couldn't wait. And this is not, a claim to judge anyone or to assume which is good, which is bad. This is a statement of fact and an invitation for you to consider. where do you think you are? Do you think you'd rather instantly gratify your needs, or are you willing to wait? Are you willing to make the effort today for a better tomorrow? Or will you squeeze out today as much as you can and not care what happens tomorrow? This is a contemplation to have with yourself. This is really, really important, because based on this, you can then start thinking, how do I want to think about my financial health, my physical health, my mental health, the way I conduct myself in work, the way I conduct myself with relationships. If you have a low time preference, you probably have much more incline into, one-time night flings with people rather than developing a long-lasting, valuable relationship. If you have a low time preference, you probably are unlikely to go to the gym today to feel better tomorrow. You'd much rather buy yourself a piece of cake and watch TV today because it's nicer today. Both of these options are for you, and it's for you to decide. But then this is where our strategies of investments and thinking about the future really meet the topic of Bitcoin. Because if you assume that your better tomorrow depends on your better decisions today, and if you want to keep some of what you earned today for a better tomorrow, then you need to start thinking about the way how to keep what you earned with you. There is a quote, I don't remember who said it, but I just wrote it down, it popped into my head. It's not what you earn, but what you keep that makes you rich. And this is key. Yes, you're earning money. Yes, you might be earning even a lot of money. The thing is though, at the end of the month, do you have any money left? That's the point. That's the key question. Because if you don't, then you're not actually preparing for the future. You're just living from paycheck to paycheck, which a majority of the world is. And that's okay. As I said, it's for you to determine, it's for you to choose. But if you do want to, over time, save and invest so you don't have to work tomorrow as much as you did today, you need to start keeping a portion of what you earned. And I'm going to write myself a note here to refer to this book, The Richest Man in Babylon, which was one of the episodes earlier in the podcast. And I'll also link the episode, Let's Talk About Money Again. Because I feel like, especially if you want to address this further, I would encourage you to explore these. This is an invitation for you to consider your time preference. This is an invitation for you to consider where you want to be in 5, 10, 20, 50 years' time. I know it might sound like a silly claim, and fair enough. I don't think it is. My perspective on this is, since I am young and healthy, thank God, right now, and I have more energy and potential space for earning more and saving more than I will in the future when, for example, I have kids or when I have, some sort of health problems or whatever, I'm willing to invest now more so my future becomes easier when I don't have those things, when I don't have the right health, for example, or when I don't have enough energy to continue working. Because if you think about it, the most scarce, the most limited resource you have is time. And over time, your time preference will shift because you will have less and less time, left. So, of course, you could live from paycheck to paycheck up until you're retirement. The question is, though, if you lived from paycheck to paycheck up until retirement, what happens if it turns out your retirement, your pension, is not enough for you to continue living as you lived? Will you be willing to take down your quality of life? Will you be willing to, I don't know, sleep on the street or get social housing or beg for money? Because the truth of the matter is, money will play a part in your life anyway, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be obsessed about it. It doesn't mean that you have to make it your God. But you should definitely recognize that in our day and age, to live well, you need some sort of financial health. And these topics, however controversial they may be, especially when talking about Bitcoin, which to many people sounds like a crazy idea that is, a scam or whatever, these are topics that certainly need to be explored, and these are topics that will certainly impact your life. Remember the quote from the very beginning. History shows it is not possible to insulate yourself from the consequences of others holding money that is harder than yours. What can you do today to make your money harder than those of others? Maybe you invest in some gold. Maybe you invest in some silver. Maybe you buy yourself stocks, bonds, whatever. Maybe you buy yourself Bitcoin. Or maybe, most importantly, you invest in education in this topic so you know and you create your own strategy to address these. Because no matter what happens, the future will come for you. And the question is, will it find you with your pants down, enjoying yourself so much that you forgot to prepare for tomorrow? Or will it find you ready and able to enjoy tomorrow as you did yesterday, because you did a good job 10 years before ensuring that you will be okay? And that's it. That's a question for you to explore. Now, the one more thing I would like to touch here, and forgive me for my ignorance in this matter. I've taken some notes, but for the most part, I would like you to read the book itself if you want to explore it more. But it's funny because I just finished uni, right? And we had business economics and macroeconomics at uni. And there is this Keynesian philosophy of economics, which is basically designed by Keynes, who was nothing else but a philosopher of finance. He had no experience in finance. He inherited all his money from his parents, and he had a very low time preference. He apparently ran huge parties and indulged in hedonistic pleasures, and was greatly against family and sort of long-term relationships. It was all about here and now, and party until the music stops. And somehow, because of his influence and maybe influential connections, most importantly among bankers in his day, his philosophy of finance and financial policy became a worldwide considered truth, to the point that universities are teaching it, even though, as I said, there is no backing for it ever being true. It's just he came up with this, and this might be the most controversial thing I'll say on this episode. It's just a bunch of crap. So if you do understand the true meaning of money and the true value of money, then you also will recognize how flawed this Keynesian economic system is. And obviously we've discussed it last week, and feel free to explore that podcast again. It's the whole credit premise and government spending as a way of enhancing economy is just upside down. And in many ways, this might just be the thing that makes you poorer and poorer over time. And the one thing to note is gold standard has been used in the United States till 1971, when President Nixon took dollar from the gold standard. So after the World War, the Second World War, United States became very influential, and the dollar became the sort of the reserve currency of the world, because United States promised, as a holder of gold, that it will issue banknotes, which were dollars, for gold from other countries, and if countries wanted to take their gold back, they could send dollars to United States, and the United States would give away gold for those dollars. Unfortunately, though, obviously they printed more money that they could give away in gold over the long term, and as the crisis within the financial fiscal policy appeared in 1971, they defaulted on their promise, which basically means they stopped. It's like suddenly they changed the rules of the game. Gold was no longer the dollar was no longer possible to be exchanged for gold. And so the dollar, the reserve currency of the world, suddenly became not connected to any true money value in itself. And there is this website, which I'll link below, called What the Fuck Happened in 1971. And the website collides all kinds of different statistics that show this weird, but not so weird if you understand the quality and the meaning of true money, thing that happened to the world, that shows just how much going away from true money, from good money, impacts all the other aspects of the economy and the world in general. The way people think about having kids, the way people think about their futures, everything. It's a sort of this, my observation is that the moment you don't have your world anchored in truth, for example, in true value of true money, lies become the truth. And so from 1971, the world went in all kinds of problematic directions because of those lies. And it's another kind of worms to explore. So I'll leave it there. But it's certainly, in connection to last week's The Creature from Jekyll Island, it certainly does beg a question of where do we want to go from here, and how maybe Bitcoin could be the tool, the resource that gets us there. And there are talks about Bitcoin becoming the world reserve currency in the future. This is a huge topic that I don't want to explore further. It's for you to educate yourself about. There is already one country called El Salvador, which announced a couple of months ago, I think, that Bitcoin is their reserve currency. So there are reasons for central banks and for banks in general, for companies to start buying Bitcoin and investing in Bitcoin, which could be a signal for us that if those huge organizations are considering this as something valuable for the future, we should too. And of course, as I said, it's for you to choose. It's for you to educate yourself. It's for you to explore. But I would invite you, and this is my challenge for you this week, educate yourself about it and understand what it means. Think about it, whether or not it's something that you resonate with as values, and then I would encourage you to get it. In the least, I would encourage you to hedge your bets, to secure yourself for the future by betting on more than one horse. So if you think about financial, items such as currency, gold, silver, stocks, property, Bitcoin, stuff like that, if you consider them to be different horses in a race, I would encourage you to bet on many, not one, because the future is uncertain. And so, even though it will certainly come, you should probably make sure that when it comes, you're prepared for as many and as different situations as there can be. So yeah, I guess that's more or less enough for me this week. I'll share below some links for you for the different things we've talked about, as well as some useful links for other podcasts that delve into more detail, especially What is Money show with Robert Breedlove, which is great for you if you want to just purely educate yourself around Bitcoin. And I hope this episode nudges you in the right direction and that it was insightful, entertaining, and useful. And thank you for your time. So have a wonderful, wonderful week. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.